Sherry Tunney for the Marine Canvas Training Institute. Today we will demonstrate the making of a Bimini top with enclosure. We'll show you how to lay out the patterns to avoid waste and how to cut and sew them together quickly. Our goal, as always, is to demonstrate how to increase your profits through the efficient use of materials and labor, while at the same time turning out top quality marine products. Let's meet Don Wedge, President of the Marine Canvas Training Institute. Hi, Don.
Hi, Sherry.
Don, even though your students may master the skills that have made you a leader in the canvas fabrication industry, just how important is the material that they use?
Well, Sherry, the material that we use makes the difference whether we can turn out a quality product that we demand from our shop and that our customers have come to expect.
So where do you go to get this top quality material?
Well, Sherry, we use mainly Unitex, who is a national supplier of Sunbrella and Gore-Tex thread. The reason we use Unitex is because they have good service and are competitively priced.
Now, what about Sunbrella?
We use Sunbrella because Sunbrella is the material that's guaranteed for 5 years. It has a full color line that matches our customers' needs, and we also use Gore-Tex thread, which is guaranteed for the life of the product.
So it's safe to say that by utilizing Sunbrella material, Gore-Tex sewing thread, and the services of Unitex, you're pretty much guaranteed a top quality product.
That's right, Sherry. Now we can go back to work.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Our project today is to set up a Bimini top frame and show you how to pattern a Bimini top with a full enclosure. Now you'll notice that we're doing this here on a jig as opposed to on a boat, because we want to teach you all the fine details of doing this. But the basics will never change whether you're on a boat or on this jig. So with the help of my two beautiful assistants here, we're going to tape this frame up, and you can go ahead and start taping it up, Becky. Now when you're taping up a frame, this is the point at which you set the overall length of the top that you have predetermined that you want it to be. So the first tape that you put on goes from one end frame to the next end frame, and that's when you set the length of the top. In this particular case, we're going to set the top at 66 inches. For those of you that don't know what we're using a fiberglass reinforced strapping tape. We found that it works a lot better than straps or rope or anything else because it's quick and easy to put it on. It doesn't cost that much to do it. And if you make a mistake and you got to change it dimension a little bit, it's real easy to do it. So they put the first tape on, which sets the overall length of the top. The next tape is going to hook the center frame to one end frame that it's swinging from. And the way we do that is we bring it down until it's about an inch above the center line tape. The reason we keep it an inch above the center line tape is you'll notice all of our frames have a crown in them. Plus this raises the center of the top just a little bit so that the water drains front to back and sideways, because when you're building Bimini tops, you want the water to get off in a hurry. Once you get the center frame set like that, then you'll put number 3 and 4 tapes on, which run from the main frame to the secondary frame over on the sides. And the reason we do that is we got to get these frames supported on the sides just enough so that we can measure them and make sure that the main frame, which is the one on this end, and the secondary frame, which is the one on the other end swinging from it, are parallel with each other. Because when you're building a Bimini top, you're trying to create a top that's a rectangular shape. So this is tape number 3 and 4. Don't fight with this tape, just put it on there. Tape number 5 and 6 will be from the attachment point on the boat, where Becky's at now, up to the frame. It's taking the place of a strap. In this case, we got lucky we don't have to do it on both ends because this particular top called for stanchions to support one end of the Bimini top frame. So what she's doing is putting tape number 5 and 6 on to pull the other tapes tight and hold the whole top together. She just lost the end of the tape. How about that? while she's finding the end of the tape, if you were having a top that you were doing without stanchions, as this one has got, then you'd have to have tapes on the other end. This is what the heat in Florida does to this strapping tape every once in a while when you get careless with it. And I picked it up this morning, and I probably picked it up out of the wrong pile. Now when she gets this other tape on, then Dawn will come to this end of the top, and if you're working alone, you'd have to use a pair of clamps. But Dawn will come to the other end of the top, and they're going to measure from the main frame to the secondary frame, which are the frames on the ends of the top, and try to get these two frames parallel with each other. Now this one has been done so many times that it usually just falls into place, but the facts of life are that when you bend your own frames, if you bend a good pair of frames that don't have any twist in them, they'll usually fall right into place. What she's doing now is putting the last two tapes on, which are brought from the main frame to the mid frame to the secondary frame, and this is locking all three of them together. One little tip, when you're putting this kind of tape on to tape these frames up, do not come around and hook the tape to itself. Hook it to the frame like she's doing now. Because if you bring it around and hook it to itself, it's a real bear to get it apart. That's part of the reason we use this tape, because it does hold. You can tape up an awful big Bimini top and not have it fall down on you until you get it all patterned. Okay, now that she's got the frame taped up into place, let's tighten it up just a little bit, Beck, and show them how the fact that the strap tape, she did not lock them down, she just put them on to hold it. Now she's tightening the top up so that it's real tight. The reason I'm saying it's real tight is this: when you start taping up a job and you're going to pattern it, you can't have it moving during the middle of the patterning process or you're creating garbage. All right, now that she's got the top taped up, she's going over on the side and she's going to run a tape down the side of the framework, which is going to establish the finish edge of the top. And this is something that this is the artistic part of this job. You have to create a product that's going to look good on the boat. You want to make sure you're not too far down so that the customer can't see out from under it. You want to make sure that that tape she's putting on right now stay in the lines of the boat. So put it on like she's done. If you're not sure what you're doing, get off of the boat, walk down the dock and take a look at it and see if it follows the lines of the boat. Because this is the facts of life. This is where your top is going to finish. In other words, the bottom edge of this tape is the finish edge of the top, and the top edge of that tape is the finish edge of the side curtains. And this is where the dot system of patterning that Marine Canvas Training Institute has developed comes into play. So Becky has decided that is going to be the finish edge, so she's going to put dots on. Now the dots that she's going to be putting on are going to be put on the top edge of this tape and on the bottom edge of the tape, in line with where the seam would be if this top were on. Now, we don't normally do this, but I'm going to ask Becky to come back over to this frame and draw you a short line on that frame so that you can see where the seam for the top should be. And if she draws it correctly, it should come right down around that corner, and if you ran it to infinity, it would go right through those dots. Now, don't go through the dots because we want to maintain the integrity of those dots. So now she's going to go ahead and put the dots on the top and the bottom edge of this tape. What this does is give you a ½ spread between the finish edge of the top and the finish edge of the side curtains. I hope everybody can see those dots. Now, how do we get those dots from that side of the frame to the other side? You don't come over here and try to string another tape and measure from the boat, because boats aren't built plumb level and square. So what you do is take a dimension from the last eye-in on the frame that you happen to be working on up to the bottom dot and come over on the other side of the frame and take that same dimension and put it on the other side of the top. She's coming up 44 1/4, and she's coming from the top edge of the last eye-in on the frame that she's looking at. Don't go from anything else because everything else could move. Now, we won't take the time to go through all three of these frames, but that's how you transfer the dots from one side of the framework to the other so that the whole top comes out symmetrical. At this point in time, you're ready to start patterning. So while the girls are getting the pattern material out, and by the way, we use shrink wrap to pattern every product that we build because it's something that you can see through and you can write notes on it to yourself and you can see your mistakes before you create them. Now we got one more thing to do before we can put the shrink wrap on. We take our strapping tape and lay it on top of these frames, which you can start right now, girls. Lay it on top of these frames, and then when on top of that, we put a 1/2 inch double-sided seam tape. The reason we put this strapping tape on the frame before we put the seam tape on is if you decide to cheat and put the seam tape on without the strapping tape, when you get all done patterning and you start trying to clean up, you can spend the next 3 days trying to get it off of the frame. So don't believe me, just try it one time, then you'll go ahead and use the strapping tape to put underneath. Then you come right back over and put this 1/2 inch seam tape on top of it. That way it's easy to remove. When you put the tape on, and this tape is being put on here to support and hold the shrink wrap while we make our pattern. Cut. All right, make sure that when you put these dots on, you put them on in line with where the seam would be if the top was on the frame. You'll notice that these dots are being put on the top edge of the tape and on the bottom edge of the tape, which puts them exactly 1/2 inch apart vertically. Now, we have a couple of other dots that have to go on, okay? And they have to be put on. What you have to understand is that this curtain, this represents the curtain over here on the side. So we're going to put a couple of dots down here on the boat where we want that side curtain to finish at the bottom corner of it. So she's putting the dot on the front bottom corner, and now she's going to put one on the back bottom corner, and now you've established the perimeter of that particular curtain. By the same token, with these frameworks that we have set up and the dots on both sides of the frame and the dots down on the corners of the boat, we've established the perimeter of all the different patterns that we have to pull on this project. Just a word of warning, when you're putting the tape on here to support the shrink wrap or to stick it to, make sure you don't bump the frame and you don't accidentally cut a tape. Because you got to remember that what you started out with here is what you want, and anything that you move or change on it is going to change your whole product, and we don't want that. So I don't care if you have to hang from a sky hook, make sure you don't bump the frame, make sure you don't cut the tape. So I got something to holler at you about. What we're doing again is we're putting this tape on the frames with the seam tape on top of it, and we're stopping short of the dots, okay? Okay, now we've got the frames all taped up. We have all the tape on to stick the shrink wrap on. And we cheated a little bit. We pre-cut some pieces of shrink wrap so that we could get through this tape a little quicker. So the girls are going to pull the protective coating off of the double-sided tape, and they're going to stick it on. Now what you would be doing is, and again, we cheated. We cut ahead of time, but while the girls are getting ready for it, I'm going to explain what they did. We measured this top, and when you're measuring this top to cut out your pieces of shrink wrap to pattern with, make sure that you cut a rectangular shaped piece of shrink wrap that is larger than the opening that's got to be patterned. And here's all the openings that have to be patterned on this particular project. From this frame to this frame, from the dots on this side of the frame to the dots on that side of the frame. The same is true on the back half of the top. You have to pattern from the mid-frame to the secondary frame and from dots to dots. For your curtains, you have to pattern from the top dots to the bottom dots. So look at the area and imagine it as a rectangular area, and cut a piece of shrink wrap larger than that rectangular area. Don't try to cut it to the shape that it is. It's too much work. Becky's showing you how to measure for the shrink wrap. Measure from the center line on the frame down to the dots, add a couple of inches, and double it. And that's the amount of shrink wrap it takes to get from one side of the frame to the other. Now she's measuring from the main frame to the mid frame, add a couple of inches, and that's plenty for this piece. When she measures for the back piece, she's measuring the same width as what she used for the front, from dots to dots, but look how she's got her ruler down here on the frame. And this is real important, so we're going to slow down and show you. Look at how she's got her ruler. A rectangular shaped piece is from where the end of her ruler is here, clear out to where her index finger is on the other side, because you're measuring from this point to the longest point on that frame. And everybody gets that goofed up, so make sure you know what you're measuring. Don't measure where she's measuring up there. That won't give you enough to do it. Make sure when you measure the pieces for your side curtains, give yourself some extra. Look at which is the longest side of the side curtain. In this case, it's longer on the bottom than it is on the top. So she's measuring from dots to dots and adding some to it. Then she's measuring from the dots on the front, across the front, and adding some to that. She's measuring the overall height, and we're real generous with the shrink wrap because it's not that expensive. It works out to about $0.05 a square foot for the patterning medium, but it's worth its weight in gold when it comes to coming up with a good pattern. Like I said, to be prepared, we cheated. We cut our shrink wrap ahead of time. And one person can do this. We're doing it in order to get this done a little quicker. The girls are holding it up. But the nice part about the shrink wrap is this. See how nice that drapes on the frame here? And believe me, you can pattern in a 20-mile-an-hour wind with this, which, you know, today we're lucky. We're in the building, there's no wind blowing except my hot air. But when you get out in the real world, we never pattern except on a day when it's blowing about 20 miles an hour. We just aren't lucky. Dawn needs to take this side loose. You probably can't see it, but there's a little sag over here. The reason that I'm bringing this up, this is the nice part about this for patterning. She can take it loose and reset it so that it looks nice, because what this looks like between these two frames is what you're going to get on the final product. Becky, why don't you come over here and trim some of the excess from here around to there so everybody can see how it makes it easier to get a hold of it. This is the place where I holler at you. Don't cut the tape and don't bump the frame, okay? But you cut the excess shrink wrap away so that you so that you can get a hold of it to handle it. Here you can throw it on the floor. Out in the marina, you better not throw it on the floor of the boat, because if you do and you step on it, you're going to go overboard. It's just like ice. Plus, I think the EPA's got something to say about letting it fall in the water, too. Or somebody. So now, Becky's got this side set, and the girls are going to mark this. Now, we pattern one opening at a time. We don't worry about the other openings, because the dots will help us put this all together. Be aware of where the girls are marking. You have to visualize where the seam is going to be in this particular product. And the way you visualize where the seam has to be is if you look at the plane of this material in relation to the plane of the next piece of material, where they would intersect on the frame is where you have to mark. Becky's showing you, she's laying two. Imagine it this way. If you had to do this with boards instead of material, where would those two boards intersect if you laid them up on the frames? That's where you have to mark. It takes a little bit of practice, but once you get it, it'll be right on the money. She's drawing the line down the frame. It's coming right in line with the dots. Now she's going to come over on this end and do the same thing. And again, over here, the seam is not on top of the frame. The seam is about 11 o'clock on this frame, because when you're looking at this frame, if this were a board and this flap down here were a board, where would they intersect? So again, you have to know your product. You have to know all the parts that are going to go to it. You'll also notice that she brought the mark down the seam line stop short of the dots and put the dots on. And if you don't want me to holler at you, put little dots, don't put big dots. And I'm talking about little 16th inch dots, because most people will come over here and they'll put a dot on here and they're totally convinced it's going to jump up and run away. So to guarantee it, and do one down here, a fake one, Beck. They'll put a little one, they say, man, that's going to run away, so they'll put it a little bigger, and then to damn guarantee it, they'll really make it big. Now, I exaggerated a little bit here, but I didn't a lot because people do this. And what this does to your product is it makes it too big. Because when you take a product and pattern it like this, if you use big lines and big dots, it's going to grow on you, and it's not going to fit. You can find a little dot just as well as you can find a big one. Becky, put a little arrow and point at one of those dots so that people can see. If you're worried about losing a dot, put a little arrow pointing to it. When you see that on the cutting table, that'll say, hey, there's something there I got to be looking for. You also notice that they put the center lines on this piece because they're very important. Now they're going to mark them as pout and sout. This happens to be the aft end of the boat here. So this is going to have sout on this side and pout on that side. Those two words stand for port outside and starboard outside on the pattern. You have to have them so you know which way is up. And you want to put a name on there, Beck? One of the habits we got into is putting a name on every piece of every pattern, because we might go out and pull patterns all day long and do 6 different jobs. And if you don't put a name on it and you get them mixed up, you're all goofed up. You don't know where you're at. Now show them how easy it comes off and how you start the next one. Now, I won't do quite so much talking on the next ones. I'll let the girls just go for it. So that you can see how fast this process is. This is not a long, drawn-out job. But I had to get those details into you. I'll guarantee you this, that if you'll learn this system of patterning and do it this way and take your time doing it, you'll be able to go out and pull all the patterns for a Bimini top with a full enclosure. And here's some of the bigger ones that we've done. This is only a 3-bow Bimini top. We've gone out and patterned a job on a fly bridge that was 12 feet wide and long enough that it required 5 frames. So we had 4 openings on the top to pattern, and then it had 19 curtains going around the Bimini top and the bridge. And we were able to pattern the whole job. 5-bow Bimini, 19 curtains, bring it back to the shop, work the patterns, make the product, take it out and put it on a boat, and it fit the first time. But if you're a nervous, go for it, fast person, don't do this. You'll just kill yourself, because you got to be very deliberate and think about what you're doing. Because all the time that you use up to make a good pattern can be made up on the cutting and the sewing table. Remember, she's putting the center marks on. This is on every pattern. That way, if we get goofed up and miss something, we can solve the problem when we get back to the shop. So now we got the aft half of the top pattern, right, girls? All right, now what we're going to do today is we're going to pattern one side curtain and one forward curtain, because it becomes very repetitious, and you're all smart enough to know what we've done on one side you can do on the other side. So the girls are going to drape this material up here and pattern the forward curtain. While they're getting this draped on here, one thing I'd like to tell you is this. When you're working with this material, pull it up till it looks nice but quit fighting with it, because you can pull wrinkles into it that you're going to have when you get the product all made. So pull it up till it looks good, stick it down, and quit. You'll also notice that she's handing her a piece of binding with some snaps in it. What we do on our jobs is we determine the perimeter of the, you can go right ahead, Beck. We determine the perimeter of the product all the way around. By that I mean the bottom edges of all the curtains. We determine that, we put the snaps in the boat because those are little people that'll help us. So then we have established the line, and part of the reason that we put the snaps in the boat ahead of time is they're little people that help us, plus we can get them symmetrical, plus we can get a pleasing line on the boat. And 90% of this job is to create a product that has a pleasing line and makes that boat look better than when you get done than when you started. And the worst thing you can do is put a crooked line of snaps on a boat and have the snaps not symmetrical with each other. So we're real careful that we get our snaps to be so far apart and in a nice symmetrical line. Now what you'll notice down here is we had the snaps in the boat. Those little people were helping us because we took some scrap binding and put some snaps in it every so often. And with the shrink wrap, you can put them on the male snap and put the female on, and it goes right over it and holds on in place. All right, what we're going to mark here is, again, we're going to mark the top edge of the frame where the seam is going to be. Now that's not where it's going to be cut, but she's going to mark it because it's the only solid place that she's got to mark to. And she's going to go down and put the 2 dots on that are on the side of the frame. And then they're going down on the bottom corners and put the dots on that were put on the bottom corners, which is the intersection of the frame, or the curtains, I'm sorry. They're going to mark the center line. And for those of you that are brand new at it, we don't do it much anymore because we know what the curtain is. But while the girls are marking, I'll explain what they're going to be doing. They're going to finish marking this curtain out. But we marked on the frame up here. When we get at the shop, we're going to cut 1 inch short of this mark because this curtain comes up under the flap 1 inch. And when you're brand new at it, if you're afraid you're going to forget it, when you get to the shop, come over here and write yourself a note. Cut 1 inch short and put a little arrow pointing to that line. So why don't you do that, Beck, so that they can see where you do it. We got pout, we got sout, we got the customer's name. Now as you're taking this off of here, when you're taking these snaps off on the bottom, mark them. That way, because sometimes you'll move the pattern once or twice just to get it tight the way you want it. And you might have 3 different marks where this snap went on. So mark the correct one. It doesn't mean that we're going to commit to it until we get back to the boat, but we're going to mark them because they become a reference to go to the next pattern. One of the other things you do, and she's coming to it right now, she's putting the center mark on the bottom of this curtain. Why is she putting it on there? Because if we had to put a smile in here, or if we had to put a roll-up in here, and we had to put vertical zippers in this curtain, if you want to watch your customer get mad and drunk all at the same time, try to put these vertical zippers in without the center mark and have those vertical zippers leaning one way or the other. And the customer gets up on the fly bridge and he goes to open that curtain, and here's 2 zippers that are tipped off like this, and he's standing there with his head cocked all day long. He ain't going to pay you for that job. So make sure that you got your center lines, because then you can create an artificial center line and have 2 zippers parallel to that will be vertical on the boat. The last part of the pattern that we have to pull here will be the side curtain pattern, which the girls are pulling up on the frame now. You'll notice it covers larger area than what we have to pattern, and they're using the tape that comes down the side of the frames to hold it up. If the wind is blowing, All it takes most of the time is a clamp up here at the top to help hold it up. On the bottom, they're using the snaps that were put in the boat and the temporary snaps to hold it on. Now you understand why the girls are patterning this instead of me, because I can't bend over that far and that good. I can, but it hurts too bad. All right, now here's what they're going to do on this pattern. All of the dots that apply that are even near this pattern will get put on it. There's 2 dots on every frame, and there's a dot on each bottom corner. And it's very important that you put all of these dots on, because when we put this whole project together on the cutting table to make our final pattern, these dots will all go together like a puzzle, so that if we've made a mistake, we'll know how to correct it at the cutting table, as opposed to going back to the boat and trying to set it up. Now they got to identify the curtain. This happens to be the pout side curtain, which is pout S/C. That's government talk for side curtain. Customer's name. And that's all there is to that, except that I want to say one thing about this patterning. Every time you make a pattern, stop and look at it and make sure that you got everything covered, because we've maybe driven 40 miles to a boat to pull a set of patterns, and it's easier to take the time to look at what's going on now than it is later. Now we're not going to take the time to pattern the other side and the aft curtain because it's repetitious, and we want to show you this whole project done today. But those are the patterns that have to be pulled on this. And girls, one more thing before you take that off. I forgot, okay? So just hold it a minute. In the event that you were going to put a smile in, you might want to determine where that smile was going to be put in. In the event that you have to put burnout strips on a curtain, which many times on fly bridges you do, Becky's going to get inside and show you how you mark the frames so that when you get back to the shop, you'll know where the burnout strips have to be sewed on the curtains. And what burnout strips are those strips that are sewed to curtains so that when the curtain is laying up against the framework and the sun's got it real hot, it doesn't burn the glass. It doesn't hurt to do this on every pattern, whether you've sold them burnout strips or not, because sometimes people will call up and say, oh, by the way, could you put burnout strips on my curtains? Well, if you do it this way, you're totally prepared for them. Plus, if you draw the burnout strip lines on here and the customer calls later and he says, oh, by the way, I want a smile in that port curtain, you know where the frames are so that you could reconstruct that smile without going back to the boat. Now you can take it off, girls, because that's all there is to it. What they're doing is they're marking the snaps that they used for the patterning. Got that all tangled up. Now they're going to take this pattern off and put it away, and because we have a lot of area that we want to cover, we're not going to show you taking the tapes off, but you'll notice that Becky is starting to take off the tape that's got the two-sided tape on it. And when you get done patterning a job, take the tapes off of the frames immediately, because the longer they stay on here, the better they fry on, especially down in the sun there where we're working in Florida. And it does the same thing up north, so just get it off, and that way you're ready to put the product on when you get back to the boat. And that concludes how to pattern a Bimini top and the enclosure that goes around it.
We'd like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, the people from Glen Raven Mills Incorporated, who manufacture Sunbrella, Unitex Incorporated, a nationwide distributor, and WL Gore & Associates, using creative technologies worldwide in the making of Gore-Tex sewing thread. Join us again when we show you how to increase your profits and save time and effort with the Marine Canvas Training Institute programs.
Sherry, you know you've done a fantastic job, but you know what?
What?
I'm sick of working. Let's go fishing.
Okay, Don, let's fish.